Hello, welcome to Iron's Health Talk with Dr. Akram. Today we're going to discuss about how we are going to bury our COVID patients who has lost their life because of this infection. For last two episodes we've been discussing about COVID infection, how it came to the world, how it spread around and how to prevent it. But now we are left with a major task with multiple religions, multiple cultures in this world. We have to consider their beliefs and what they want to do while we have to prevent this infection spreading around. Let's look at few funeral practices around the world. Let's look at the Egyptians. Egyptians made huge pyramids for their pharaohs, and they mummified the body and they took them with all their wealth to rest in those chambers. And that actually became a scientific evidence for us to study about their cultures now. Let's talk about another old culture, which is Zoroastrians. Zoroastrians, they have built big towers. In these big towers, they took the dead body and they left it there to be eaten by the birds of prey like vultures. They thought contamination of the elements like air, fire, earth and water by this decaying corpse was wrong, which was against their religion. And let's look at some of the weird practices around the world. Trojan people in Sulawesi, they have a completely weird practice. What they do, they go and dig these bodies which has been buried for years for special days. They bring them back to their home. They dress them in beautiful dresses. They take pictures. They celebrate them, and they go and bury them back again. But let's look at another old religion is Hindu religion, which has been there for more than 5,000 years in the world. They would like to cremate their bodies, and sometimes they even drop the bodies or they let the bodies to float in the Ganges, the holy river. And exactly same thing is practiced in Buddhism, but they obviously they like to cremate their bodies. And monotheistic religions like Judaism, Christianity and Islam, they have a different belief. They think the body has come from the earth and the body has to return to the earth, and that's why they favor of burial practices. Let's look at what's happening with COVID-19. In certain countries, it's gone to extremes. Like we've been seeing some videos in Ecuador. The people are so desperate, there's so many deaths around there, and they can't bury them. Probably they don't have any facilities, and they are just tossing the bodies around the streets, or sometimes they set fire to the bodies and they ran away, and the police or the health officials came and took these bodies back to where it's supposed to be. While all these things going on, there is a big debate going around the world. How can we do our last respect to our loved ones who left us behind because of this infection? This is the main talk. I know a talk which not many people would love to talk about this, but this is really important for our society, especially for the people who are living in this world. This is really important. While we are respecting our beliefs, we have to be careful with our hygiene and not to let the infection spread around. For this reason, we have our special guest brought into this show. Let me get him on the show. Our special guest today is a clinical director for primary care SAS North and Central London. He is a COVID-19 strategy lead for practices in North London. He is also a GP. He studied medicine in Sheffield Medical School. Then he worked in Nottingham for 9 years before moving to London 5 years ago. He has extensive experience in surgical and trauma fields. He is also a trainer for junior doctors and involved in clinical research. He is also an expedition doctor, and he has special interest in tropical disease and parasitology. He is involved in community awareness and disease prevention on long-term conditions, and currently on community awareness and prevention of COVID-19 in North London, and engaged in the primary care hot tub program in Nightingale Hospital. Please welcome Dr. Feroz Mubarak to our show.
Thank you for inviting me here.
Dr. Feroz, I think we are here to discuss a completely different topic. Usually we discuss about medicine. Today we are here to discuss about how we are going to respect our beliefs, and at the same time how we can prevent this infection going around the world. What do you think about cremation?
Cremation is a cultural practice, as you know. There are situations where the cremation is recommended for certain conditions or infections, I should say, in certain circumstances. But cremation is largely a cultural practice. And obviously, compared to burial, it's preferred by certain cultures, like you mentioned, as you mentioned. But it's just like a day-to-day practice preferred by a certain group of people or cultures.
Excellent. Well, when the infection is going around in big numbers at the moment, there are about 1.5, 1.6 million actually people being tested positive for this infection. Over 100,000 people are dead in the world. Can countries cope up burying each and every body?
That's a really good question, actually. Yes, it's a very valid question in terms of the numbers, whether could you deal with that or not. It depends on the amount of dead people and the resources and the land which is available for burial. In ideal situation, if you're talking about the burial, so you do need one grave for one body, and you would find that in non-ideal situations, more than one body is buried in a bigger grave, and then going to a larger scale burials actually is buried in bulk. So it depends on the country and the availability of space. If you are thinking about somewhere like Maldives, a very small country, and you got 1,000 deaths in one time, yes, it would be a question as to whether it would be practically achievable. But with regards to COVID-19 deaths and the countries where it's massively involved in terms of the severity of that, I don't think we have hit that point yet in terms of that you can't bury the bodies. I think the main issue isn't whether the burial could be practically facilitated. I think the main issue is the worry of infectivity of the bodies. That's what persuades most of the countries or most of the cultures, or should I say mostly political cultures, to prefer cremation rather than burial.
While we go to burial a bit later, I just want to focus a little bit on these cremation issues. Like, as a layperson, if I would think about an infected body, you take this body to a crematorium, you leave it or you dump it there, and it's a high heat that will kill all the bacteria, virus, and everything, especially, and all the cells. I mean, as a layperson, I think, oh, this is the best practice. But what is the scientific reasons behind it? Are they anything promoting cremation, or?
The best way to answer that is whether you are using a screw to send a screwdriver to send a screw into a wound, or do you want to use a hammer to send a screw into a wood? These are the two questions. So you could do the job by both means. The question is, are you using the right tool?
Right tool.
So when you're talking about cremating a body for infectivity, you need to think about the proportion of the need, whether this is the right way to dispose of this body because of other associated risks. Now, if I may go into the COVID-19 and the virus which causes SARS-CoV-2, which is obviously a virus, there is, in medicine, from the pathological perspective, there are degrees of infectivity. So there is category 1 all the way to category 4.
Category 1 to category 4.
Yeah.
All right.
So category 1 is very low risk. Category 2 is a slightly high risk.
What do you
Category
think as
3
category 1 risk like?
It is very low risk, very, very low risk. There is no need for any special arrangements of that. But
So
you need
can I
to,
say common cold? Or?
yeah, so I can't really name each
Okay.
condition for whichever the category is.
All right.
But usually anything which is, it doesn't have a significant risk of infection.
Perfect. Yes.
Would fall under category 1 and 2. Category 3 is the one which you would have to start about thinking about infectivity from the bodies. And that would be normally, you must have heard of SARS, MERS, TB, including the COVID-19 virus, which is SARS-CoV-2.
So you're trying to say
under
TB and COVID-19 are in the similar
same
category.
Correct, yeah.
In infectiveness.
Correct.
The
Category
TB we've been dealing for years probably now in
Yeah.
our world, and I'm not sure if all the TB patients been cremated.
Yeah, no, not that I know of.
It
Not,
was
not
not-
because the important thing is that because of the TB you cremate? This
Okay.
is the question we need to answer.
All right.
Because whether the cremation is the right thing or not is a cultural decision.
Excellent.
But should you be cremating because of the infection?
Because of the
disease
infection, that's
is the actual question we need to ask.
Exactly, yeah.
So, as I was said, category 3 and category 4 are the ones which normally involves bloodborne disease, especially viral hemorrhagic fever or Ebola, and these are the infected bodies. What we would think about, should we have a higher precaution about should we bury them or not? If even with those cases, there are arguments whether should you really cremate them or is there a safer way to disperse those bodies off. But the main question is SARS-CoV-2, which only falls under category 3, which means there is no real necessity for them to be cremated.
For them to be cremated.
The main reason here, if I may mention, is because SARS-CoV-2 is spread by droplets, respiratory droplets. There's 99% of these infection comes through the respiratory system. 1% or less than 1% is spread through either feces, urine, or blood.
Okay.
So if you think about the majority of the spread of this virus is through the respiratory droplet or even body fluid. You know, after a body dies, it actually leaks some fluids. So long as you can confidently contain these fluids, and of course you would agree with me, once some person dies, they don't produce any respiratory breaths.
So what you're trying to say is, when the person dies, the infectiveness is less than the person who lives with the disease.
Absolutely, you made the right point there. So if I am sitting with you, we say you have got COVID-19, you are more likely to infect me compared to if I am sitting here with a dead body there which is infected of COVID-19, I'm getting that infection.
So there is nothing called we should be really afraid of this dead body and run away from this room. There's a dead body.
Yeah, so there are precautions to take. Obviously, you need to wear personal protective equipment so long as you don't touch the body or directly handle them. And there are other precautions you need to make, but the body is safe, especially in a body bag. You know, obviously, when a patient dies, the patient will be taken to mortuary and put in a body bag, especially anybody with infection in it, to stop the fluid leaking into the storage area. And once it's in a body bag, it's much safer, as safe as a normal body once it's contained within the body bag.
Okay, so that explains, I think, if there's COVID-19 infected body, person who died, if he is packed in this special bag and zipped in, and if there is no fluid coming out, we should be able to touch.
Yeah.
provided
it's advisable
wearing
not to
gloves.
touch, but you can touch it with the gloves. Yeah, you can touch the bag with the gloves. Obviously, handling the funeral is a different story because,
Okay.
of course, the funeral directors who have got special advice and precautions to take. But in terms of infectivity concerns, it's significantly less infective than a live person with COVID-19.
There is no reason that family should not go to the funeral. Actually, there was a case in London, the 13-year-old boy who unfortunately died of this infection.
Yeah.
And when his body was, when his funeral was done, I think the family could not go. But that was not, they couldn't go for some reason. What was the reason behind?
I don't know the exact reason, but there are two things to understand here. So there was an issue where when the child was, you know, in his last breaths, obviously you are not allowed as a family member to be able to be there present in the ITU or HDU because no family members will be allowed there because of the high infection risk. So that's one thing. The second thing is whether could you take part in the cremation or not. I'm not talking specifically about that incident, but once somebody's passed away, you can take part in the funeral of the person, but there are certain strict rules to follow. For example, social distancing, the distance, the 2-meter distance between the attendees, and also to limit the numbers. Usually in the UK, they suggest 7 to 10 persons only. Only very close family members are allowed. And usually the undertakers don't let the family members to handle the body. It's the undertakers who do that. So it's important to understand the situation in its right context. So you are allowed to take part in the funerals, but depending on that you observe the safety precautions.
Okay. Actually, I think I remember it from reading from the newspaper that his family was self-isolating because of this COVID, because that family had another few more kids, 4 or 5 kids, and so that was the reason they could not participate for that funeral. Yeah. But I think I saw some pictures. Other people had gone there and they have done the last rites and they were doing prayers, standing 1 meter apart from the...
I think that's the point. The point is a lot of people have got this misconception about, okay, this is a body with COVID-19, we should not do anything with it and we should stay away from it. And there's a lot of fear about that. What they really forget is the fear of the living who has got the COVID-19. The most important message to kind of put across is that it's not the dead body which is more infectious, it's actually the live person with COVID-19.
The live person is more infectious than the dead body?
Definitely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Because that's how I said it's to do with the respiratory droplets. So a dead body doesn't produce it unless you handled the body wrongly or compressed the chest or whatever. So that's the reason why it is more
Let's go back to cremation. Is there any environmental impact with this cremation? I don't know if you have gone into that much in detail, but in case you've read through any details.
Yeah, well, obviously cremation is burning. So you're actually burning an organic material, which is the body. So, and you do produce combustion. So you would produce more carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide and the material which comes from it. So in that perspective, burning is actually environmentally not as friendly as composting the body, because even when you compost the body actually kind of gives out organic material into the soil, so it actually gets used into the system of cycle, you know.
So it follows the natural cycle, isn't it? So it's
absolutely.
all the materials, all the carbon and oxygen, nitrogen, everything goes to the ground, and it can be used for the plants and
absolutely.
So on.
But some people environmentalists do argue in the facts that this is done and dusted matter, but whereas when you're involved a burial, there's other factors involved. So you get the cost and, you know, the material you put in and all the coffin. So you're talking about these added factors which may cause environmental harm. But practically speaking, anything natural is the most natural way. That's what I would say. So burning a body isn't the natural way.
Isn't the natural way.
Yeah, because burying is the natural way. So if you're talking about straightforward burial of a body, that burial itself is the most environmentally friendly thing to do to the environment.
Let's talk about a little bit about the old cremation where they have piled up logs and they place the body on top of that and burn. Probably that would have caused more environmental impact than a gas fire what we have at the moment, I suppose.
Correct, yeah, because that fire will burn for longer and it would need more wood to burn, and possibly they might just involve other things to just complete the burning. Whereas the present day, the modern cemetery has got a high temperature burners. So they actually gases, they just burn the body, combust the body much quicker, so the burning time is significantly less. And there are complete combustion rather than partial combustion, which causes more environmental damage. So if you can just combust the material completely, then that is much better for the environment than just combusting halfway through.
Perfect. Okay. We are going to discuss more in detail about the burial. Most probably it is going to be after our quick break, but we're not yet ready for the break. And I would like to ask another question, but this is like, is there a reason for certain countries to imply people on a certain kind of burial? Is it that you have to bury it or you have to cremate it? What's the scientific reason? Are there any scientific reason behind it?
So there are two fronts where usually the chief medical officers in the countries try to put forward to. So there are some countries who actually try to impose cremation rather than allowing any room for burial. Some countries are quite neutral. For example, the UK, you must have seen that there had been some notion about going for cremation, but they suddenly turned into a neutral opinion about it. But those countries who try to impose cremation, they argue on two fronts. One front is that the infectivity. The second front is the environmental risk of the virus going into the water reserve. These are the two main areas what they try to argue. But if you really look into the actual science behind these worries, as I mentioned to you, when a body dies, obviously, so let's just go to the basics again. So as you know, it is a virus. It's an RNA virus. So usually it has got just the RNAs inside.
Are there
it's got a
different
capsule.
kind of viruses around? Are they?
Yeah, so there are
RNA virus.
Correct. There are two different kinds of viruses: DNA virus and RNA viruses. Some scientists don't believe viruses are actually organisms. They don't believe they are alive because they don't have any self-reproducing organs in them.
So a virus cannot self-produce?
Self-replicate, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what does it
especially
need?
if you're talking about RNA viruses, they can't self-replicate. They need to use a host to replicate.
Excellent.
So what they do is they invade the host cell and they inject their RNAs into the host cell.
So this host cell can be an animal, can be a
it's
person.
Mostly living.
A living creature.
Yeah, it's a living cell.
Okay.
And that then the RNA uses the cell's mechanism to produce more copies of RNAs. So they're called RNA polymerases. And then once more of those RNAs are reproduced, they use the other part of the cells to produce the capsule, because RNA has got the nucleotide, because it's actually a core body inside, and they have got a capsule. That capsule is actually made within the host cell before it can come out. That's the protective cell. The capsule itself at the top has got anchors which can cling on to the other cells and use a channel to go into that cell. So these are receptors.
So these viruses come into our body and use our body to multiply themselves.
Correct, yeah.
And is their main aim is to attack us, or is it their survival?
No, their main aim is exactly the same as any animal, basic instinct, reproduction. So the basic function of any organism is to reproduce and survive. Okay, to survive, they need to eat. Yes, so they need to consume. To consume, they need to compete. To compete, they need to fight. right? So what the viruses do is they go into a body, they start the fighting or invasion, they reproduce. As a process, the cell dies or it buds off the cell and then goes and invades more. So those are the fundamental principles or the needs of any organisms. Of course, the more complex the organism is, the more abstract the process becomes.
Okay, let's go back to this RNA virus that we started with, and I think
yes, correct. Okay, yeah. So it's important to mention about the virus because the virus cannot replicate outside a living cell. So when a COVID-19 infected patient dies, their cell starts to die because there is no oxygen in their body. So all the human cells are aerobic cells.
Will there be a time then the virus is trying to run away and find a different host? Is it the more dangerous time? Is that right?
No. So the virus would not know this person is dying.
Oh, okay, that's
okay. So that from the information, also you need to remember that we have very limited scientific information about this virus because we are only known to man for the last 4 months also. Okay.
Perfect.
Just this particular virus, but we do know about coronavirus for a long time. But then once this virus comes to a point, these cells come to a point of death, the viruses will have to come out of the cell because the cell dies.
Right.
So the virus will spill out of the cell and will be contained within the fluids of the dead body.
Fluids of the dead body.
Fluids of the dead body.
So
they may in the tissues, they may come out of the fluid.
Fly away or something.
They cannot because they only are transmitted through respiratory droplets or body fluids.
Body fluids. Okay.
So if when somebody dies, nothing gets out of them unless you get it out of them. If you push their chest, some respiratory fluids may come out. Or if they got some chest drain or something like that, fluid may come out, right? So that is the point. The reproducing mechanism for this, the roots or the machinery are shutting down for the virus. So even though the person dies, then the system may not shut down straight away. So may go for another hour or maybe 12 hours or 24 hours, but it will eventually shut down. At that point, no more replication for the virus. And the only thing it could happen is stay there put and die slowly, or get transmitted through other contacts. For example, if you handled a dead body, then it would go to another person and start the cycle again.
Right.
So that is the discussion. The discussion is how infective is that body? And then what should we do to contain it?
Okay. The next question is, I'm just thinking, like, if the person dies, how long can the virus live until it goes to a different person or until it dies?
Now, this is an answer nobody knows.
Nobody knows that.
Because there's not enough research being done on dead bodies yet. But there are speculation as to how long it could die. Now, on a live person, there had been evidence to say, for example, if I started the symptom today, or if I got the confirmation that I've got the virus today, so there are evidence to say the virus can live in me for up to 5 weeks.
5 weeks.
Now that's the limited evidence we have, but usually it should just be in and out within about 2 to 3 weeks, or maximum 4 weeks, maybe 28 days.
So that means the virus come to you and they just either it infect you and kill you, or it just leave you alone and goes to somebody else. Is that right?
It's not straightforward as that, but there is. But usually, as you know, 80% of under 70s will have very mild to no symptoms.
Okay.
So that doesn't mean I'm not infected. I am infected.
Yeah.
So usually a lot of people will see symptom between 5 days to 12 to 15 days. I'll say roughly about 12 days. And then would start to improve within the next 1 week also. Overall, within 3 weeks, maximum 4 weeks, your immunity take control over it and you are better. That's why the 14-day isolation period is hopefully that the majority of the infectivity is within that 14 days.
So the virus does not leave yourself, it's your body fights it against and it kills this virus or something.
So eventually body will get rid of it. But some of those viruses will escape and then go and infect other people.
Other people.
But that's the live body. But in terms of the dead body, We don't know how long it lives,
Right.
but it can't live forever, purely because it cannot survive in the environment where it is.
Where it is.
Because we know some evidences from how long this virus can live on the surfaces, different surfaces. It lives for a shorter period of time. For example, shiny metal surfaces can live up to 12 hours. Some studies say it can live up to 72 hours. Copper surfaces can live just for 4 hours. So different surfaces it can live for longer. But the general view is that this virus cannot survive months and months and months.
Months, right.
So it would stop surviving after a long period of time, depending on what condition it is.
Exactly. I think it's in metal, it lives about 9 days or something. I'm not sure. Right?
It's shiny metals, yeah.
Shiny
we can say up to 9 days, but the actual evidence is 72 hours.
72 hours.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So it's still trained people could handle this body, and they can still prepare a funeral for the family. Is that right with this body?
Yes, correct. Yeah. So that's the end point where the virus will be well contained within a dead body is the point of discussion as to how the dead body should be prepared.
How does it have to be prepared as scientifically, and what are the evidences?
At the moment, if you talk about how it's done in the UK, so once the patient kind of dies after the full confirmation of death, the body will be taken into the mortuary and will be put in a body bag, purely because the risk of leakage of fluids. Okay,
right.
And it's a sealed body bag. It's in the UK. It's a single layer body bag. It's not a special body bag. It's not a coated body bag with bactericidal things or anything like that. It's a straightforward body bag.
I'm going to hold you just 1 minute. We have a caller online. We'll answer his call and we'll go back to the topic again. Hello. Hello, wa alaikum assalam. What's your name, sir?
My name is Abdul Samad, brother.
Abdul Samad.
Yeah,
where are you from? Where do you live?
I'm from Tower Hamlet, East London.
East London, excellent.
Yeah.
What do you like to say? What do you like to ask us?
I'd like to ask you some advice from me. If anyone got symptom about coronavirus, so how long it's going to be stay in body? Like 1 week, 2 weeks?
So you're asking if you have symptoms?
Not me. I said that if anyone got symptom, how long it's going to be stay? Like 2-3 weeks or?
Assalamu alaikum, Abdul Samad. So I understand that your question is, if somebody got COVID-19, the coronavirus, how long would they have the symptom? Is that correct? Okay, so I understand that is a question. It depends on what symptom you get, and also depend on your immune response. As I mentioned before, a lot of people, young people, who would have very mild symptom or no symptom at all, but usually those symptoms should come out within 7 to 14 days. But if you have the symptom, you say you start with a fever or a cough or a sore throat today, you should isolate yourself for 7 days minimum. But if you are living with somebody who doesn't develop symptoms, they should isolate themselves for 14 days, because they may come up with those symptoms anytime within that 14 days. But if they develop a symptom, we say in about 10 days time from the time they've been exposed to you, then they should isolate themselves for another 7 days from that 10 days. I hope I answered your question.
Abdul Samad, thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you some other time. Let's go back to the body bag. And sorry, we were talking about the single layer bag.
So I'm just telling you about the process. So it's done in the UK. So they will put this body in the single layer bag, and then they leave it in the mortuary with the other bodies. And then the undertakers will come and take the body with them, and usually put it in a coffin to carry it. But if they don't have a coffin, they can actually take the body bag with them.
I'm going to hold you there,
and
I think we are going to go for a quick break. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you after a short break.